right, I'm setting us up on the Facebook Live in our group. All right, let's see here. It is setting up right now, and then we'll get started in just a few moments. Okay, I can see myself live, so that means we are broadcasting through the internet right now on Facebook, as well as recording this Zoom webinar. Welcome everybody. Bienvenidos, damas y caballeros. Happy Cinco de Mayo to everyone in Atlanta and Maryland, across the US, and hopefully across the world. We are bringing to you another monthly webinar panel. And this month, it's on civility. The theme for this month is civil disagreement within us, from the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement. Again, this march, besides the principles that I just listed, was spurred on due to some political unrest with impeachment hearings and a digression in politics and the national conversation, both in Washington, D.C., as well as in neighborhoods. And a way that I saw, as well as some of my friends saw, a path forward in order to get over some of the hardship we were facing was through unity, speaking with a unified voice and bringing people to the table, acting civil, to come up with solutions and propose solutions where the others hear and you heard other people, and political engagement to make sure that you're voting as well as holding political officials accountable. With me today, I have the pleasure of having Vikram Handel, my brother, as well as David Jeang, who are going to talk about their experience with civility and their own spaces that they've worked in and lived in. So without further ado, let me introduce Vikram Handel. Vikram, could you tell a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you, Simmy, for the introduction, and happy Cinco de Mayo.
Thank you.
Yeah, obviously grateful that you have me here on this webinar, but yeah, just a quick little background on me. You know, obviously, like you mentioned, your little brother. Little is a relative, but I grew up playing tennis, and that was the majority of my younger years. And I grew up traveling all across the world, or sorry, across the country. And I did travel overseas some for some tournaments. I did play at a collegiate level and then briefly at the professional. I currently now am the VP of Sales and Marketing over at Phoenix Risk Management, our family insurance agency. And part of that was I also organized a Phoenix Pro League, a professional tennis league here in Atlanta that introduced or brought together some of the best pros here in the city, and basically just showed off some great tennis at the different clubs here in Atlanta.
Thank you for the introduction, Vikram. I'm looking forward to hearing what your thoughts are on civility this month. And David Jeang, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm a resident in the Aspen Hill community of Montgomery County, located in the state of Maryland. I was a first-time candidate in 2018, ran under the Green Party ticket, and following, and afterwards I volunteered to. Well, it was supposed to be an election, but there weren't enough seats. There weren't enough people to fill the seats, so basically it was pretty much volunteer to join my branch of Our Revolution steering committee.
That's great, David. And David, on top of that, to add to your resume and kind of transition into mine, we both graduated from Johns Hopkins in 2011. And I'm really impressed with what you've been able to do, same age as me, and being able to run for office is really impressive and opens my eyes to the possibilities and the expectations that we have on our generation, regardless of.
Well, I can't take all the. Well, I can't say it's not that big an accomplishment. I've only really been able to do this because the job markets in my area just aren't looking for my specifications.
Well, I appreciate your level of civility and modesty you're already bringing to the conversation, David. Continuing on with a little bit more about me, I also am a VP, but of operations and finance at the family agency Vikram mentioned, Phoenix Risk Management, graduated from Hopkins, as we were talking about. And here, as I referred to before, I felt compelled to do something about the political conversation we were having in America, but I also saw it around the world. This was in February. Since then, the stakes have gotten even higher, in my opinion, with COVID-19. Every day, as many of you know, since April 2nd in America, there have been at least 22,000 new cases of COVID-19 and 1,000 deaths. And across the world, over 250,000 people have died as of this morning, with over 68,000 occurring just in the US. That means that over 25% of COVID-19 deaths have occurred in the US. That's a little scary and definitely a wake-up call, more than a little scary. And my heart goes out to those that have been affected directly by this, as well as the loved ones that have been affected. On top of that, we're feeling ramifications in the economy, with 20% of the American workforce being unemployed. And the problems just keep adding up. This is only a few months since the original march we had in February, and I hope that, at least for me, I know it's compelling me to make sure that I get engaged and try to make a difference where I can and have conversations so that I can, one, learn from those that are currently doing it, as well as hear from people that have different backgrounds from me. Two, listen. And then three, also through that process, be able to love thy neighbor, be able to understand their story and try to get the best solution in place for our communities. A big part of that, in my opinion, as is indicated by the title, is civility. Being able to come to the conversation and have a disagreement with someone, being able to hear them out, but say, hey, I have a different point of view and this is why. And I feel like that is lost a lot of times these days. I'd like to begin by talking with David and challenging to see what you think, David, has occurred with one of the political candidates that you've supported in the past. As at least for me, I try to understand, what is that threshold for civility? Where do we actually draw the line with, hey, I want to be patient and listen to someone's point of view versus actually saying, hey, this is wrong, and pushing back. Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard filed a defamation suit in January 2020 against former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, alleging that Clinton lied about Gabbard and harmed her campaign when she appeared to suggest in a 2019 podcast interview that Gabbard was a Russian asset. A president is supposed to unify the country, of course, but this appears to be a setback in unifying not only the Democratic Party, but also the country. Not exactly a civil disagreement. Was this the best option for Gabbard, in your opinion, David?
I actually think so.
Okay.
This was, she did not go. She did not go on and exchange insults. She actually took civil action. She had to, and the fact that she did this over someone, over, well, not just someone, but someone and their entire wing pushing a narrative as if it were factual when there has been no proof whatsoever. It only shows that they, they wanted that they didn't want anything. They didn't want this unity in the first place. It was not that they wanted to, they didn't want to talk or listen. They
Yeah.
simply that they simply wanted to see who would agree with them, who would not, and those who didn't would simply be shunned, ignored, or or driven into obscurity.
I hear you, and it is disappointing. I hear it a lot, this inflammatory discourse between opponents, but you can even see it within the same party, especially as candidates are vying for position. I can understand that there is some pushback for being called such a thing and trying to take some action to prevent such accusations, especially when it has such a negative connotation and potentially is unfounded. So I appreciate that perspective, David. Do you think that she would have been less effective if she tried to have a conversation behind closed doors with Secretary of State Clinton?
Uh, uh, Possibly, if she could get that, they never. As you can, as if you recall from actually filing the lawsuit, they refused to even meet the legal team at first. They hold up behind their facility and barred them from entry. Basically,
Wow.
but basically saying if they can't approach them, there's no case.
I see. Yeah, if you're not even open to having the conversation, it's hard to have that discussion to actually clear the air and try to get past an issue. Fair point, David.
Like I was saying, they didn't want to have a discussion. They just they just wanted to want to literally uh, literally.
Sure, they wanted to make a statement and not actually have the follow through after that. I can understand the frustration from the Gabbard campaign. I'm gonna transition to Vic. All right, little brother, I've got a question for you. Throughout your athletic and professional career, you've been answering to supervisors. I've been on the front end of that and experienced that. Whether it's at Georgia Tech, UNC Charlotte, where you were a student athlete answering to your coach. At work, you've been answering to your CEO, who we both know pretty well. At the Phoenix Pro League, you're answering to a number of stakeholders, including the sponsors and the facilities themselves. Disagreement on issues is a natural occurrence. Could you speak to an example where an example disagreement with those you answer to and how you address the disagreement?
Sure. I mean, like you mentioned, at every level, whether it was my junior, collegiate, or professional level, I was always answering to someone, and at some point there will be disagreement. I think that's just in human nature that everyone will have opposing ideas and opinions. So it is important to be able to have that discourse civilly. That being said, it is hard to come up with a single example, but a very common one, especially at the collegiate level, where a lot of people are butting heads, is when it comes to lineup decisions. So in collegiate tennis, just a quick background, there's 6 singles lines, and the coach is the one who determines who plays ahead of who. And there will be a lot of headbutting there. Some players might think they're better than others, or they should be playing higher. Egos definitely get involved to some point. But I mean, just like in society, it's important to have that discussion civilly. Um, I mean, can't recall his name. I believe his name was Jocko Willink. He was a Marine. He did a TED talk where he said calm breeds calm. And obviously in his example, he was referring to in battle, you don't want to be out there screaming, yelling at people. You want to try and react to situations calmly. And it might not be as an extreme of an example, but you when you do have an issue and you want to bring it up and articulate it with someone else, you do want to bring it up with your teammate or coach in a civil manner, because you're more likely to get a civil response back.
Yeah, I like that phrase, calm breeds calm. And that's something that I've experienced myself is if you get amped and get passionate about a situation, it's hard to make sure that the other person is thinking clearly through their response, thinking clearly through problem solving and coming up with a way for both sides to win.
Sure.
Before I ask,
Go ahead, Simmy. I apologize.
no worries. I was just gonna say out to our attendees or attendee that if you have any question or any comment you'd like to make, you can use the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen of the Zoom webinar to ask that question so that I can pose it to our panelists. As a follow-up, Vikram, you were about to say something, but what I was getting at was with tennis, it's especially one-on-one compared to other sports, you have the ability to just play a match to see who's better than the other person. That's not always true when it comes to doubles. Did you find that it was more difficult to find that positioning or the best lineup at that level? And on top of that, what about the idea of stacking or putting players that might not be as good ahead of others in order to better your chances of winning a dual match?
Sure. So there's a few things to address there. I'll start with the stacking thing, basically implying that you're putting a lower quality player higher up in order to win the lower lines. And in that sense, it might be frowned upon. Some coaches do resort to using that tactic. When it comes to sports, as long as within the rules, some people will say it's fair. All is fair in love and war. So I don't foresee that being necessarily an issue. As far as coming up with the doubles lines you also brought up, I think that comes with a lot of experimentation and seeing who gels with who. Two good singles players might not be, the better doubles pairing. But my previous example, when I was referring to two teammates maybe arguing or butting heads about who should play higher, one thing that comes up is, a player might want to approach the coach about who, they think should be playing higher. And I think in a similar situation, you also want to approach it in a civil manner. I think at any point when you're having these kinds of discourses, you got to articulate and be, I hate to keep using the word civil, but you do want to use a civil manner, because then if you don't, you get a lot of negative reactions. You might lose trust within teammates and coaches. You might lose confidence. And there's a number of negative results that could happen there. So it is always good to approach it with a calm mind.
And let me attack it from a different angle. A lot of times, this might be true of other sports as opposed to tennis, which is considered a more proper sport where you go out and you play by the rules and you shake the other player's hands at the end of the match. But when you think of football, when you think of basketball, you think of coaches really getting in your face and getting you amped to work as hard as you can, whether it's a workout, whether it's a match or just a set of points or a drill that you're playing with another player. Do you find those methods of encouraging younger players or those teammates to be effective, or is there a downside to it? Where do you kind of draw the line between using the civil approach versus really getting in someone's face in order to bring out the best in them?
Sure. And I'm going to use a word that you had used earlier, which was passion. I think a lot of times coaches and players, they get caught up in the passion, and they do end up, getting in each other's faces and screaming and yelling. And I think for certain players that might be effective. But similar to, there's different ways to skin a cat. There's different ways to coach players, and players respond to different tactics of coaching. So I do think for some people that might work, and it's hard to say because I haven't been on the coaching side of that. So I don't know what the how far you need to go before you change tactics. But especially in a sport maybe like tennis where it's a little more mild mannered and you don't have all these big guys charging at each other, maybe a more civil approach would be the correct one.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And let me turn the table on to you, David. This is higher stakes than just sports and getting better as a player in your individual sport. If you were to be elected to office, especially in a time like this, I know you were a candidate in 2018 and you plan on being a candidate in the future. You literally have people's lives in your hands depending on the policy that you go with and the policy that you advocate for. Where do you see drawing the line in terms of being civil with your counterparts, whether that be in state senate or another office, in order to come up with the best policy, as opposed to just really letting the passion take over and getting in someone's face and saying, hey, we have X number of people that might die if we don't move forward with a plan? Do you find that there is a certain threshold or there's certain situations where you really turn on the fire, or you try to be civil and maybe use humor to your advantage, David?
Yeah, yes. Partic- uh, mm, Particularly on issue on various issues in my state that have been attempted at multiple times, but have often failed in committee. But in my state, it is the committees that kill most bills, not the floor itself. And and of course, I would not draw my line immediately, but I would first draw my reasoning arguments, but inform the crowd, and if there's still hot topic about if they still won't budge on issues. Worse yet, if they agree on my sentiment, but still refuse to push it through for quote unquote reasons. That's when I get that's when I think a certain level of civility has to go out the window, because because everyone is fed up with those quote unquote reasons, except those who benefit from those so quote unquote reasons. And I think we all know who benefits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I can understand. I mean, I just looking at those stats on the paper as I was reading them, 1,000 Americans dying every day from COVID-19 since April 2nd, when we're considered one of the most advanced countries with one of the best healthcare systems and some of the best public health scientists in the world. It's very sad to see that, and scary to think about. And it makes me upset as well. Do you think that you would be more effective at making your case by being passionate, David? Or do you think that there is a better way at addressing those quote unquote reasons behind closed doors, as opposed to making an impassioned case to the face of those politicians?
Well, it's not the politicians I need to make my impassioned in case two. They wouldn't care how I presented either way. A lot of them already have their minds made up, and not. Let me just say, putting them in a ring and socking them in the face wouldn't even convince them to change their minds. It's the passion would need to come. Would need to come from the constituency, which I'm afraid doesn't care much what goes on behind closed doors because they don't know that there's even closed doors to begin with.
Mm.
It would. Oh, I've been to marches on my state capital of Annapolis before, but I think in some cases it needs to go a little further. It's not mass crowds have gathered on front of the steps. Some have even gone into committee groups, but it's that when these bills still fail, that's when you need to impassion your the constituency to cause a thing, to make the state to make legislation, that this is not an issue to be easily dismissed. Now this is a level of what my friends like to call civil disobedience that will ultimately get you in trouble with security or even get arrested in some case. But that's what's going it's going to take at this point. If the more you twiddle the thumbs, the more a necessity it will become, because the more dire the situation will be. But there is I think a time limit on civil discourse when you have certain things at stake. It's not a pretty answer,
yeah, but timeline there. I can understand wanting to get things done, especially when lives are on the line. Not something that can potentially prevent in a month or a certain amount of time from now.
No.
Did we lose Simmy?
Yes, we lost it.
Oh, he's back. Simmy, you're back.
I'm back.
Take over as host for a second.
How did that go, David? Did you enjoy that?
Not particularly.
There's my man. That's a civil answer for you, Vikram. Well, as I wrap up here, if the viewers have any questions, please pose it on the Q&A. And David and Vic, if you guys have any questions for one another, you can think about it right now as I say my closing thoughts. Guys, I really appreciate the attendees that have joined. I appreciate the panelists who have sacrificed some time out of their day as well as yesterday to make sure that they attend and they offer their pearls of wisdom and their thoughts on the matter. And it gives me personally a lot of energy. It gives me a lot of confidence and a sense of relief that we have people like me and like others that were pivotal to this march, that want to do something about the current discourse that we have, not only in this country, but around the world. If you have any ideas about the march, how it can be improved, or maybe some panelists that you would like to nominate to be on this march to talk about unity, civility, and political engagement, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And we, again, meet on the first Tuesday of every month at 5 p.m. Eastern to count down to Election Tuesday, in November. Vic, David, do you have any questions that you would like to ask one another before we wrap up?
I've got nothing.
Vic is on mute, but I think I read his lips properly.
Sorry, I
I'll let you.
don't want the screen to keep coming on me, but yeah, no, nothing at this point. Any questions from the audience?
Do we have an audience?
I'm listening.
We do have a riveting. Thank you very much, Mrs. Jeang. I appreciate that. Thank you to Vikram. I really appreciate your time. And thank you, David Jeang. Wish you best of luck in your political career.
Uh-huh.
I also want to give a special thanks to Diana Jeang, who has helped me with the testing process, as well as has been by my side since the very first March and February. Thank you, Diana. And lastly, I would like to thank Alex Dos Santos, who has helped get me set up with Zoom and put this in motion. Thank you, Alex. Thank you again to everyone around the world.
Simmy, real quick,
Vikram
Shayna said she sent a question in. I don't know if you saw that.
I did not see that. Could she text the question? Because I don't see a Q&A right now. Is it on Facebook that she asked?
You said in the
Oh,
comments.
here. Oh, I see now. I see it in Facebook. I'm going to pose this to Vikram because I think you guys do a good job answering. All right, Vikram, let me ask you this before we go. Send us off on a good note. Why has civility become so important in recent years?
Gotcha. Well, I don't want to necessarily point any fingers, but I think it stems from the contentious political climate we're at right now. I think basically political campaigns have just become playground insulting matches, and I mean, instead of talking about the real issues, they're just looking for other ways to, talk about why the candidate's not fit to run for office. And even that, these news shows that our parents love to binge, they're not even having a conversation or a debate. They're just talking over each other and yelling over each other. I think our leaders need to do a better job of acting civil, especially when having their debates. I think that would reflect in society as well. In the words of the great George Costanza, we're living in a society. So I think to some extent, we need to be able to have these conversations in a civil manner. I will say part of the reason why it's so important today is I think especially at a political standpoint, our country's at probably one of the most polar opposite ends that I've ever seen. But yeah, I think it is important to have that civil conversation to be able to discuss the opposing views.
May I add something?
Please.
I would like to emphasize on the point that civility without action is meaningless, and that's what's happened in this current political climate. They have a lot of people who have supposed to be opposing this kind of action have overinflated the point of civility to a point where that they're not fighting for anything else policy-wise. If we can just go back to being polite, everything in the world will be right again. That's basically the attitude of those leaders, and that in point causes civility to actually erode even further among those outside their circle, because those outside saying, see that. But what about this point A? What about this point? What about this point C? That's not gonna go away if you're suddenly just talking nicely about things. In fact, you're not talking about these points at all. That's what. So, so yes, civility is nice, but civility is meant to keep the points on topic. But if you're not even talking about the points, then what's the point of civility?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure, well said. Yes, I think that's a good point, that without action towards moving in the right direction and acting on what is right, then just being nice to one another and maybe even looking the other way, the government and society as we know it. I agree. And it's one piece of the puzzle, as the name of the march is, but I think that we're taking our own steps, not nice, but also speak power. Thank you for that point, David. With that, I think that covers the questions that we have. I want to thank the panelists once again, and to everyone that's been involved. I will see all you cool cats and kittens next. Adios.
Thanks, and hopefully you'll have a stronger connection next time.
Awesome. Thank you, Simmy, for hosting us, and I'm looking forward to next month.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you to all of you.